Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here at my next Legend of Korra Book 4 Balance episode review. This one's going to be for K409 Beyond the Wilds, episode 9 of Book 4 Balance. And yeah, I thought this was a really good episode. Obviously there's the huge contrast between this week and last week, where also we had the kind of recap clip show episode, and this was like a full-on episode. And I think it really showed like what you kind of missed out on not really having much from last week's episode. Like realistically, the only thing that probably carried over from last week's episode into this episode was Bolin. Probably a little bit of setup for Bolin and Opal's reunion, and that he knew he'd kind of have to beg for her forgiveness. That was really the only setup that we had there, and I think they really now missed a beat in episode 8, not having Korra's section of that episode set up Korra in this episode. I'll talk about this more when I kind of get to Korra, like the specific part of this episode, but it definitely was pretty apparent that they've been a little bit kind of confusing with regards to like what exactly Korra is dealing with. Ultimately, it was dealt with well, but it's not been perfect, I don't think. So let's get into the episode. So yeah, obviously from the preview clip and my speculation, I was really thinking this was going to be heavy Spirit Vine focused episode. And I kind of had a feeling Korra was going to get on the case because it made the most logical sense. Jinora would be and stuff like that. But ultimately, the Spirit Vines, while important to the episode, kind of just created the potential for Korra character development. Because it set up this situation where Korra had to kind of fully complete her kind of recovery to actually save everyone from being abducted by the Spirit Vines, because it had to deal heavily with her spirituality. Ultimately, I suppose the issue is not with this episode, but more of like what's come before. I really think going back to the episode where Korra, basically got the metal out of her, you really should have actually set it up more of that. It's not fully done there, rather than kind of have it come up in the middle of Korra's fight with Kuvira, and it kind of misleads you to think it's something else. Because I think a lot of people, when the whole Kuvira thing happens, when Korra was about to kill Kuvira in the Avatar state, and then it happens again, she sees the vision of herself in Kuvira, everyone was thinking that that was actually something different than what she dealt with, which was carrying around the villain fights with previous villains with her. It really it really, in episode, I think it was like 4 or 5, I thought that Korra had gotten past that there, and then this was something different, more specific to Kuvira. Probably that she felt that in killing Kuvira, she's sort of killing herself because she sees a little bit of herself in Kuvira. But this episode presents the idea that she hasn't fully gotten over at least Zahir. She's maybe gotten past Unalaq, Amon, and stuff like that, but Zahir, the person who killed her, still plays on her mind. That should have been set up, because for me the recap for this episode at the start, it kind of shows some of the clips from previous episodes. She gets the metal out of herself, but she's still struggling with Zahir in her mind, and I'm just like, what? I thought you dealt with that in the previous episode. Like, it shouldn't have been a shock to me that the recap actually brought that up. It really shouldn't, but it was. So that's a slight issue I had going into this episode. Ultimately, it makes sense that she hadn't fully dealt with it, and maybe explains why she wasn't at completely full power yet, and explains why she's been at basically 95%, but not 100% just yet in, going forward. But mainly what was dealt with Korra in this episode was the fact that because she's been gone for so long, and probably maybe because of some of the stuff people have seen her do since she's come back, they really don't really think she's capable. They all say that that's not what it's about, but to Korra, that's what she sees it for. They would have always called Korra in to deal with some of these issues, and instead she kind of has to find out herself. Like, I thought it was brilliant to use Wu in that way, in that he was invited to this meeting of world leaders, but Korra wasn't. And even when they called it out and we're just like, hey, we don't think you're ready for it, and Korra's just like, but still, Wu instead of me. And she really took insult to that, and rightfully so, because even Tenzin later on in the episode I suppose he kind of does enough to kind of make her kind of not kind of fully like angry at what he said, but still you definitely see that they are doubting her skills and stuff like that, and she just isn't having any of that. So I do like the setup for that. That to prove herself to everyone that she's better, she has to complete her recovery, and she decides to do that by actually going to visit Zahir. Now, a lot of people speculated that this would happen, and while I don't think I specifically speculated it, I kind of had a feeling like at some point maybe that would be the most logical thing to do for her to confront her fear, the person who nearly killed her. And I thought it kind of makes sense as well because Zahir is the only villain from last season that's still alive. Gazan, Minghua, and Kali are all dead. He obviously is still alive for a reason, and now we have that reason. So obviously the main kind of gist of kind of Korra needing to do this is because when she goes to basically the whole spirit vine plot happens. Janora ends up captured Ryu and a lot of other people in Republic City, and Mako and Korra go to investigate, and they find out that they're all being trapped in these kind of vines. Like the source of the vines has kind of created these kind of cocoons around the people, which have transferred their spirit into the spirit world while keeping them alive in the physical world. It was actually an interesting use of vines, but something I would like to be explained. Like, apart from this episode, what is the purpose of that power of spirit vines? Like, it seems like such a weird power to just like trap a person, keep them alive, and just transfer their spirit into the spirit world, and trap them in an energy cocoon. Like, it seems a pretty weird power. If there's no specific reason for it. Like, the idea is that it's a defensive mechanism, just like people are attacking spirit vines, you capture people, abduct them, put them into the spirit world where spirit vines have more power. That sort of makes more sense, but I would like a little bit more explanation. But I did like how Korra had enough power to actually sense that Kuvira is messing with the swamp, and that's causing the spirit vines here to go crazy as well. And also, I just did like that in general. Like, they found out all the stuff about the spirit vines. Like, they found out that what Varric's going to be doing with the spirit vine weapon, what Varric is doing with the spirit vine weapon, what Kuvira is planning to do, and just they know all the information pretty much about the spirit vines, more or less. I kind of like that it's all come out. But ultimately, the problem was that Korra wasn't able to get Janora and the other people out of these kind of cocoons, because when she tried to go into the spirit world to sort it out from the other side, she couldn't go in because she couldn't meditate into the spirit world because of these issues with Zahir kind of blocking her path into the spirit world. And I quite like that, because obviously it keeps the continuity up, in that when she visited the spirit world in Korra alone, she walked through one of the portals, so that makes sense. And then obviously when she goes to visit Zahir, that's what the reveal of the thing in the mountain is. That makes sense. It's a really interesting conversation. I actually really thought it was super interesting. Like, the first minute or two, you're like, oh, I'm not really sure where this is going, because Zahir just acts the villain. Like, he tries to scare her, he knows he's scared, he kind of isn't really answering her questions, and you're like, oh, this is going to be another Zuko talking to Ozai in The Promise kind of situation. But very quickly, they both become very honest with each other, and as much as I don't think Zahir was the best villain last season. One of the scenes I really did enjoy last book was Zahir and Korra talking in the spirit world, because you don't often see that, where like the villain and the hero can just have a conversation with each other without a fight about to happen and stuff like that. They just like literally sit in front of each other. Of course, Korra standing, but they just talk to each other. And the same pretty much happens here, except Zahir's in chains as he's kind of floating, and Korra is there to kind of visit him. And I kind of like how she went there to basically prove to herself that she wasn't afraid of him, but she realized there and then that she was afraid of him when he kind of went at her. But ultimately, that she brought up the fact that, look, you haven't done anything good here. You thought chaos would help the world, but you've actually just created a situation for the world's greatest dictator to thrive. And suddenly, like, Zahir kind of changes, and he's just like, oh yeah, I've heard tales of her power. She needs to be stopped. And I kind of like that the past villain and the hero are kind of coming, have this kind of similar ground over the fact that Kuvira is someone they both want to stop. Kuvira is like the definition of what Zahir doesn't want, even more so than basically any of the other world leaders. Kuvira is the one thing that Zahir doesn't want, and Kuvira obviously needs to stop her to. Obviously, Korra needs to stop Kuvira to fulfill her role, and so he does actually try and help her, and stuff like that, because he kind of just points out that like things change and stuff like that. Like you have all the power in the world, but you limit yourself, and I like that Korra kind of points out that there's always a limit to my power. Of course there is. Even in the Avatar state, I have a limit to my powers. But he says no, you don't, and he helps her meditate in the spirit world. And I like that it was just as simple as she has to see the whole vision without waking up. I like that it was something as simple as that. It really actually worked. That she had to actually see it through, in that she'd always stopped it basically just before that moment where, like, in her mind, if she watched it further, she would have died. When in fact, what actually happened was that she defeated Zahir. Like, she wasn't killed. She managed to defeat him, obviously with the help of Janor and stuff like that. But what happened was not that she was killed. Yes, she was poisoned, she was badly injured, but she survived that conflict and ended up defeating Zahir in the end. And so she just needed to have this play out. And almost it's a point of like Toph told her to like leave her battles in the past, but Zahir kind of teaches her to like, no, don't just forget about them. Keep them on your mind, but know exactly what happened. Like Korra not thinking about it almost led it to be worse than what it actually is. So it's a really interesting kind of situation that you had there in just the way that it was resolved. That she just literally had to see the vision through and see that she didn't die in this situation, that her surviving through that has made her stronger here. And that's pretty cool. And he points out like another thing to her, that like you may not realize it, but just the fact that you survived that poisoning shows that there is no limit on power that should have killed you, but you kept yourself alive with your like power. You broke the limit and stuff like that. So it just worked really well. Like, does the hero have a plan? I'm not really sure. If this is the only time we see him in the book, I'm perfectly fine with that. But if there is something with him, that would also be pretty interesting, because obviously there's more Red Lotus members still out there. Maybe he has some goal that he still has to accomplish. But if that's his sole role, helping Korra to kind of complete her recovery, that's fine. And I also like that it didn't just play out as the villain helping the hero because he's in prison. That he kind of helped her to help himself. That like he's willing to help Korra with this so she can take out this dictator which she absolutely hates. And so she gets into the spirit world, and I like that Rava spoke for the first time since season 2. I really appreciate that they actually addressed that kind of big issue, because with Korra being basically the only avatar in this kind of new cycle, all the past lives gone, it would make sense that Rava would talk to Korra more and be that kind of advisor to her without the past lives to go to. And I just like that little moment where he says like, Rava, are you there? And she says like, I've always been here. Only now could I speak and stuff like that. And that worked as a way to just show that basically Korra in the Avatar state managed to defeat Kuvira fairly easily. But now she's at full power and Rava can speak to her. She has a full connection to her Avatar spirit back. How powerful is Korra now? So that's pretty cool. And obviously, ultimately, it's just that, I don't have my bending here. And she shows, Rava basically just teaches Korra that, you have power in the spirit world because you're connected to all the spirits. You're the Avatar. And she frees the ball in the ball of energy in the spirit world, which frees them in the physical world, and kind of Korra has proven herself to everyone again that she is capable and has developed. I liked Korra's arc in this episode. I thought it was really, really good. Rest of the episode, you had Bolin trying to kind of win back Opal with the apologies and stuff like that. But I liked that with Opal, she was kind of like happy that Bolin was back and happy that he's back on their side and he's kind of back in the city, not working for Kuvira. But she has to make him realize just how, much damage basically Kuvira has done to her family, and that maybe and that like she I think she is open to forgiving him, but she really just wants him to know how much he kind of put her family through just in not supporting her and the family and being on the wrong side of things. And so, when the picnic happens, she I really like Opal's line when she just says there's just like, given everything that's happened, this is what you want, really. And then when she realizes that, wait, no, I shouldn't be trying to just make up to her romantically. I should be just trying to make up for what I actually did. And so when he comes up to her at the end, she's just like, I'm willing to do anything. And she's just like, come with me and Lynn on this mission. And that really works because this idea of Lynn, Opal, and Bolin as this kind of team works so well because if they're really going to Zaofu to get back the rest of the family, that's such a cool idea because it really presents the idea that Toph is really going to heavily come back into things because what's been set up, Toph is basically Bolin's idol. That I can't remember what he specifically said about her, but he basically said that ever since I heard about Toph, I always wanted to be a metal bender. I think that was what it was. So he wants to meet Toph. Opal, I don't think. Is the implication that she's never met her grandmother before? I'm not really sure about that one. Probably, yeah, because I think the feud between Sue and Lynn is so long that maybe it didn't happen. But I don't really know the timing of when that like reunion happened. Maybe Opal has met Toph before. I'm not quite sure on that one. I don't know. Did Sue actually state when that meeting happened with Toph that Lynn didn't go to? Maybe it was far enough in the past that Opal wasn't born yet, but either way, she maybe hasn't seen her grandmother in a while. So that's something. And then of course Lynn hasn't seen her mother in a long time. So lots of stuff set up with regards to that group. Maybe going back to Xiaofu, maybe getting the rest of the family and meeting up with Toph at some point. That seems really cool. And yeah, just Lynn going against the law again. And I just kind of like that Lynn has come back into things. And that she has changed. She's not just... She's kind of... just the fact that she's willing to do everything to save her family is kind of big. And kind of shows Lynn's development and that she's willing to do this for her family and stuff like that. That's it's really nice just seeing Lynn talk nicely to Opal, be so willing to save Sue. You can see the development of like meeting back up with most of her family last book did. Rest of the episode, Asami and Varric meet up again because they're put to work on basically counteracting the spirit-flying weaponry. And I really like Asami here in that she's just like, she does not have time for Varric at this point in time. Like, she of all people knows just how much trouble he caused in the past, and that now that she's older, she's just like, I am having none of this, and just basically threatens him physically. It's just like, I'm gonna break your arm if you mess this up, and he's just like, oh, okay. So that's cool, and so I'm really sort of wondering just with Asami, like, is Hiroshi actually gonna be a thing there? Just because it seemed like it was set up something going forward. Maybe he'll be required, like the two will hit a wall and then Asami like reveals her last name or something like that to Varric, and he's just like, wait, your father's Hiroshi? Like, he taught me everything I know or something like that. Like, there's a potential for some cool connection there with maybe Varric and Hiroshi or some like rivalry or something like that and them working together. But yeah, I'd like to see Hiroshi come back into things. That would be really cool. But yeah, that. I pretty much think that's most of the episode. Fire Lord Azumi spoke for the first time. That was pretty interesting. Just the council deciding on plans was actually a fairly interesting idea. In that, for the first time in the whole series, basically, President Raiko actually wants to do something. But obviously, for obvious reasons, Tenzin doesn't want to involve his airbenders in a conflict like this unless necessary. Izumi says that she doesn't want to involve the Fire Nation unless it's absolutely necessary in this war as well. And yeah, the voice is interesting, and it's kind of quite formal, very kind of blunt. It wasn't like it wasn't just like this really kind way of saying that, like, I'll support you when the time comes, but not right now. I don't want to risk my country. She just says it like really like almost meanly to Raiko. It's just like, no, not unless this happens. Just like, but and then Raiko's just like, okay, we'll just take the defensive, and he's just like, that will do. I want to hear her speak more and get more of her like personality, like maybe when she talks to Zuko, or has more kind of personal talks with like Lin or Tenzin. Because right now in this kind of business kind of doing world leader role stuff, she seemed very formal. So I'm very interested to see more on her. But yeah, the plan is just that they're going to stay on the defensive right now. I suppose going forward, with like 4 episodes to go, the one thing we don't know yet is what exactly is Kavira's end goal. Like, what is the stakes for the finale right now? Because this episode overall was good, but it was very self-contained in that primarily it was focused on Korra's development, which was important, and I really enjoyed it. But the series, I think, really needs to focus on what Kuvira is planning to do next. Because okay, Korra's back, ready to go, but where does the final battle take place? With Lin and Lin, Bolin and Opal going to Zaofu, is the battle going to take place at Zaofu? Where is Kuvira still at the swamp? There's a lot of logistics with regards to like, okay, how do all of these people come together at a certain point? But yeah, overall, I'm very pleased with this episode. Apart from some like minor issues, just with regard to the setup on some of Korra's development going into this episode, I thought it was really good. And I think it leaves the series in a good place going forward. Yes, a few of our kind of main characters, we still don't fully know where they're going to be when we go into the finale, but I think the series is in a good position now. It had a lot of kind of work to suppose make up for with obviously the budget cuts, meaning the last episode had to be the way it was. But I think it did so much, and I'm really excited to talk about this episode on the podcast on Sunday. So yeah, Korra Roundtable podcast for this episode, Beyond the Wild, is going to be this Sunday. Definitely check that out when we release the podcast on Sunday. So yeah, that's been the review. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on the episode. Thanks for watching, and bye.